Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Business Breakthroughs. I'm your co-host, Chris Angel. I'm here with your host, Michael Millay and Andrew Honigsfeld. Hello, gentlemen.
How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
We are doing great.
Good. Listen, first of all, we've been having some amazing conversations. I feel like we're really starting to hit a stride with like where we're going, what we're digging into. There's so much more to hiring people and running a business than I think meets the surface, right? What's on the surface.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys are taking us into some deep dives of the stuff that really more than produces a result, but produces like how we transform as people to really manage the successes that we create. So,
well, you can always produce a result.
Yeah. Yes.
Like you can always get what you want in a lot of different ways.
Yep.
But the real value is in being someone that looks at things in a way that you can reproduce the result over and over.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Definitely.
it. That is it. There's so many people that will hustle and grind because they read a book and they'll do this. We talked about this in past episodes, but they'll do the stuff, they'll produce a result, but they hit a ceiling because they didn't know how to think about it. And who they become is just somebody that produced a result, not somebody that knows how they produced the result.
Well, and
It's
that's
actually, I was going to say, it's actually interesting. I personally I think Tony Robbins is great, but I often see that from people that come out of like a Tony Robbins event is they come out and they're like, yeah, I'm jazzed up. And then they run and they run and they run and they're breaking through all sorts of walls. And then all of a sudden they're like, where am I? How did I get here? What happened? And it's exactly that, and like, I know that's not the intention of Tony Robbins. And I just know that like, it's part of like a seminar, any kind of seminar like that. But I really find people are jazzed up after it. They create these awesome results, but then they can't reproduce it because they can't reproduce that feeling of who they were being while producing it.
And that's what we call seminar syndrome.
Woohoo. That's ouch. We used to call that a bad news insight. You're like, oh,
well,
yeah.
That's the thing about insights is that all of them are actually great news. Because unless you know where you're at and you have the insight to actually see clearly what's going on with you, you have no ability to affect it.
Right.
Which I know we had set like the topic for this show as leadership is a function of clarity and communication.
Yeah.
Which I think this perfectly points to that.
Oh, yeah. This is our transition. We're going there.
Yeah, I mean, since you opened the door, I figured I might as well walk through, I guess.
Right. It's perfect. Yeah,
To be fair, you don't need the door open to go through anyways, Michael.
I mean, I've never Kool-Aid manned into a conversation.
That takes me
That is
back.
some other person
back.
named Michael Millay who looks identical to me.
That's good culture.
Yeah.
It's good cultural reference right there. Kool-Aid man.
I'm even wearing the red shirt, so it's even better.
That is our topic. We are talking about leadership today. And I think this entire prelude to this conversation is exactly that conversation. Like you can go produce a result, but without developing your leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And getting clear, you're gonna to Andrew, to your point, you're gonna run through a bunch of walls and then wonder where you are. You're like, who am I? How did I get here? Because you got there not from a function of leadership and clarity. You got there from a function of hustle and energy. Right. Exactly. Changing your state, which is what, Tony Robbins is known for, changing state. Great. Change your state. But if you don't backfill with clarity and leadership, then you're going to be wondering where you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and that's actually such a huge component of, people generally fall into a few different categories. One of the categories is they will do all the actions, hustle, do everything right, get either a result or the result they want. Either or doesn't really matter. It's still the same type of person. Mm-hmm. And then they'll be like, oh, but now I want something else. Right. Because the people who are driven by that are really achievement oriented usually. Mm-hmm. And or have just this huge fear of failure and judgment and whatever other nonsense they're packing along as their baggage. Yeah. Doesn't really matter. But the point is that they then want to produce another result and they're starting back at square one.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because they haven't actually developed themselves as someone who's effective at having themselves produce result.
Right.
They're they've developed themselves as someone who's effective at following instructions of someone else to get a result.
I want to insert something here because I saw this in the real estate industry a long time where people would sign up for 8-week courses. Every week they'd show up. They were I don't want to say forced, but it was expected that you were going to make 20 calls
right
on your lunch break. And one of the really cool things about this event was, they could point to the numbers that the average agent that went through this 8-week process would produce X amount of transactions. And so that's pretty compelling. But what I saw every time was that people would get through 8 weeks and be mentally and emotionally exhausted, and they'd go hide for 6 months. And then their income would drop. And they'd be like, crap, I got to get back into that 8-week thing again. So they jump back in it. And it's this big roller coaster of up and down.
Right.
Because they were following instructions, not because
that's because they're trying to operate like they're Andrew's going to know the term of this. What are those drag race, like where they have the parachutes that come out the back of the car?
Yeah, like
and
quarter-mile drag race? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not a big car race person, clearly. But it's like they're taking a Hummer or a Ford truck and trying to do that and then wondering why it doesn't work very well, as opposed to doing it in a way that suits their own style.
Right.
And that's why the clarity component is so huge.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of these programs, I think, are effective and can produce effective results.
Right.
But then when people go into those programs and don't produce effective results, they view themselves as the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Which maybe they didn't try, maybe they didn't actually care. Doesn't really matter. But the point is they weren't set up to succeed by either the nature of themselves or the nature of the program didn't click together.
Right.
And that's one of the things I think that me and Andrew do so brilliantly is we've done a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. And for us, we're not attached to any particular style.
Sure.
Like, it doesn't matter how you are. It matters about what works for you to get where you want to go.
Right.
And if you're a Hummer, we're not going to tell you to go drag racing to sprint over to someplace. We're going to be like, yeah, just cruise through the mountains.
You guys have the best metaphors. I love it. Anybody listening to this, you have to go back through these episodes and just listen for all the metaphors. We should put like metaphor bingo, and like you guys listening, like
I was actually thinking that would be a great, like, to just cut together our different metaphors.
Right.
See what kind of episode that turns out to be.
I know that would be.
You have a lot of vehicle and natural metaphors, I've noticed.
It'd be incredible. I love it. Well, so here's what I want to unpack is the clarity piece. Because where I feel like what you're saying about leadership, part of leadership is knowing who you are. That's what I feel. And so are you saying that leadership is a function of clarity, that meaning you've got to be clear on who you are? Or what is the clarity piece? Clear about what?
I think there's who you are. And it's also where you want to go. Like, where do you want to take your team to go? Whether you're a team lead in real estate, a business owner, a manager that manages people. It's like, where do you want to go?
It's really good. Yeah.
And then also part of the clarity is who do you want to go there with you?
Well, and that actually speaks to a different level of clarity, which is what do you need to get there?
Right.
Because, I mean, Chris, how many people have you seen who are like, I want to be a realtor who creates a $3 million annual revenue business. And you're like, cool. How many houses would you need to sell then? And they're like, I don't know, but I want to create a 3 million. And it's like, okay, well, looking at that particular realtor, let's say they hate doing cold calls.
Right.
Not a big deal, but how are they going to then work around that?
Right.
And that's why the clarity piece is so important, because unless you're clear on what it actually looks like, and what it looks like as a whole, you're clear on what parts you're going to be doing inside of that.
Right.
You can't build the structures around you, whether it's through automation and artificial intelligence, and like different stuff like that, or if it's through having someone who's an assistant or someone who's doing cold calls, and we're just focusing on real estate because it's relevant for this, but I mean, it's applicable in any business. And so that's where the clarity part comes in, because you need to know yourself well enough to know what you want, where you're at, and then what you need.
Yeah.
And so many people resist their weaknesses.
Right.
And
Seriously.
if you resist your weaknesses, you're not actually going to look at them fully. And that's part of it, is like, until you fully accept those quote unquote weaknesses as part of you, which ironically, your greatest weaknesses are a function of your greatest strengths. But that's a whole different conversation.
Maybe a future episode.
Definitely.
Andrew, you go back to what you were saying, because you were on the right track.
I was just pointing out that it, and it's essentially what he talked about. If you don't know what you need to get where you're going, you don't really know where you're going.
Right. Or you may not be able to, you may know where you want to go, but you may not sustain the journey there if you don't have what you need.
Yeah. I was just listening. I was listening to a book, and they talked about the two people who were the first people to try to go to the South Pole.
Right.
And I can't remember their names, but one guy planned for the best case scenario, one flag where his food stash would be and all of this stuff. As long as everything went perfectly, he would be fine. And the other person packed way more than they needed and was like, I have no clue what I'm going to expect, but I know that I'm going to be over prepared for this. And placed like 20 markers where their food were, and like different markers that led them back to where they needed to go, and just was really on top of it. And that clarity of like, I'm going to get there, I'm going to get back, and I'm going to be aware that anything and everything could happen. So I know what I need. And they packed, they were prepared essentially. Yeah. And you can't be prepared if you don't really know what you want. And one team made it and made it back, and the other team actually perished on the journey.
Right.
And it's literally the difference of being clear, being clear of like, hey, I can't plan on the best case scenario happening, because that never happens. And like,
also sometimes your weakness might be planning. So literally you shouldn't be doing the planning regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a function of knowing where you want to go and what you want to happen, and being sure that you get there is sort of where I was going.
I feel like one of the things that you're bringing up is that in the this is true for me, in the preparing, I often want to look at the best case scenario.
Exactly.
Which is what you mentioned, right?
Hi, Fred.
Yeah, right. Hi, Fred. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's that I don't want to consider the option of things failing, and so I don't plan for failing, because in the law of attraction of it all, and I need to put out in the world the best case scenario. I resist the worst case scenario. Back to your resisting conversation, I resist the worst case scenario, and so I don't actually look at all the pieces and what I might need to pack on my path to success in business.
Yeah, that actually brings up another great point that I don't know if we have time to go into on this episode, but the breakdown with positive mindset and like the law of attraction and all this stuff is, when you're only focused on the positive, it doesn't allow you to actually clean out any of the negative stuff that you have going on. And part of it is, it's like you don't then spring clean your mindset, essentially.
Yeah.
And so you need to actually take time to focus on some negative too.
Andrew?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, part of it is like you put out that the best case scenario is going to happen, but you plan and pack for the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what you're pointing at, is people don't like to do that because they like, well, I don't want to put it out that this might happen. Guess what? When I'm packing my bag for an overnight, journey, or for a, a backpacking trip, I don't hope that the worst case scenario doesn't happen. I plan and prepare for myself to be taken care of no matter what. And I say, we're going to have clear skies, great weather, and it's not going to be an issue.
Yeah.
Apparently dying gets in the way of the whole living life thing.
Yeah. Sometimes. Well, take me back to the 4 things. You said 4 things, and I pictured this Venn diagram of 4 overlapping circles, but it was, you got to know who you are.
Yep.
You got to know, do you remember the next one?
What you need was one of them.
You got to know who you are. You need to know what you need. You need
who
to
know
know
want to go with.
Who do you want to go with?
Yeah.
And where do you want to go? Is that what it was?
Yeah. And where do you want to go? Exactly.
I love the overlap of those.
Well, yeah. And so, I mean, part of it is like, if you're missing any one of those pieces, it's like you either don't have a map,
right?
Don't have a rudder, don't have the steering wheel to turn the boat,
right?
Or turn the rudder. And so it's like, you need all of those. And you
don't have the crew to row. That's the last part, where you don't have the crew to row.
Or you don't have a sail even, let's say.
Like, cut to metaphor. Outtakes. Yeah, it's perfect.
I mean, well, and that's the beauty of metaphors, is that people can then, it actually allows for you to digest more complex concepts.
Yeah.
And that's why we use them so much, is because there is incredible value in when you can see something in one area, to be able to translate it into your own life where you might be resisting something. Right. It's much easier if you can see it. And that's why, like, probably when we're talking to you, Chris, or people who are listening can hear themselves inside of that.
Yep.
And it's why a lot of these motivational seminars and things do great, because there's some really common themes that human beings deal with, and you can find yourself in anyone.
I can see that inside of these 4 things, each of these 4 things, there's, I don't want to say curriculum, but there's actually work to be done. Like, in order to understand who you are, have clarity around who you are, there's a bunch of work to be done to go find your assets, to find what you should be leveraging as your strengths. And then inside of where do I want to go? I think some people have a hard time answering that question. They're like, well, I kind of have this number, but why do I want to go there? I don't really know. I'm in this business. I need to do something with it.
Right. Exactly.
You know,
ironically, so I'm going to say something kind of funny, because most people would say that not knowing why you want the number is actually a problem. The real problem is knowing if you're willing to do what it takes to get the number.
Right.
Not why. And like, I know for me, like, Andrew always jokes about me, like, I want the money so that I can then use it to make more money. And it's not for any purpose other than I just find it fun. Sure. And it's like grown-up Monopoly in some ways. But like, I mean, and that's like literally how my mindset is around it. But so many people think, like, they've heard, oh, this person over here wasn't able to get there until they saw why they wanted that money.
Right.
And it's not about why, it's what are you willing to do to get there? And what is your goal? And so many people give up on their goal because they don't set what they actually want. And they set it inside of these expectations of what they should want. And that's where, like, for us, it's a really simple conversation. It takes about 5 minutes.
Right. Well, I want to say, like, this is why. So this conversation, we're hitting this from a super high altitude. Like, we're hitting you with the concepts and the places to look. And I feel like if any of this is connected with you listening, like, what there is to do is you've got to start to go get specific. Like, don't leave this with some great insight. Like, oh, clarity has these 4 areas. Like, don't leave and be an insight junkie. Like, take the insight and go start cultivating and digging and excavating for each of those 4 areas. And the way to do that is by having a conversation with Michael and Andrew, right? Like, these guys know how to take you there. Just like if you're not a good planner, you need to talk to somebody who knows how to help you plan for stuff. So guys, let's finish there. Like, if people want to connect with you on this, they want to get clear about where they're going, who they are, who they want to take with them, and what to bring with them. Like, where can they go to connect with you?
Go to myperfecthire.com and you'll see an option to connect with us, and we will have a conversation with you. Set you on the right track.
I love it. It's really good. Okay, well, we teased out all sorts of other episodes. I can't wait to see what we do in the next one based on all the things that came up here. But until then, guys, thanks for your time, and we'll see you.
Thank you.
Pleasure as always.